What if the next Attorney General of the United States, the person who would oversee all federal law enforcement, has serious, documented, unanswered questions connecting him to one of the most disturbing criminal cases in American history? What if senators were being asked to vote on that nomination without seeing the full record? That's not a hypothetical. That is happening right now. And the brand new federal lawsuit filed just days ago is demanding answers before it's too late. I'm talking about Todd Blanche, acting Attorney General of the United States, Donald Trump's former personal criminal defense lawyer. And now, the man one Senate confirmation vote away from running the entire Department of Justice. Today, we break down the lawsuit that could change everything. The documents being demanded, the Epstein connections, the Judge Cannon angle, and why July 15th, his confirmation hearing date, is becoming a countdown clock that powerful legal organizations are racing against. Stay with me, because this story has layers that most outlets are not connecting for you. But we will, right here, right now. Let's establish who Todd Blanche actually is, because the mainstream narrative often skips the most important parts of his biography. Todd Blanche is a former federal prosecutor who became one of Donald Trump's most loyal, personal criminal defense attorneys. He represented Trump through multiple federal indictments. He sat at the defense table. He argued the cases. He was Trump's lawyer in the classified documents case, the Mar-a-Lago espionage and obstruction investigation, one of the most serious federal cases in American political history. Then, after Trump won the 2024 election, Blanche was rewarded. But here's what the timeline actually looks like, and this is critical context. Right after the election, leaked Transition Committee documents reportedly showed that Judge Aileen Cannon, yes, that Judge Cannon, the Florida judge who ultimately dismissed the classified documents case against Trump, was actually the top candidate to become Attorney General. Her name was at the top of an organizational chart. Blanche was listed second. Emil Bove was third. Cannon didn't take the position. So the slot went to Matt Gaetz, a sitting Florida congressman. Then Matt Gaetz became engulfed in a child sex trafficking investigation by the House Ethics Committee. The committee had been investigating him for years. He resigned from Congress to cut off that committee's jurisdiction over him. And through a combination of public pressure and legal actions, Gaetz's nomination collapsed before he ever faced a confirmation hearing. Then came Pam Bondi, another Florida Republican, former state attorney general. She got confirmed, she served, and Blanche stayed as her deputy. Again, the number 2, never the number 1. Then Bondi was fired. And now, finally, it is Todd Blanche's moment. Acting Attorney General, nominee for the permanent position. Confirmation hearing, July 15th. 3 Attorneys General nominees. And Blanche, patient, loyal, relentlessly subservient to Trump, is finally at the front of the line. Now let's get into the meat of this story, because a new Freedom of Information Act lawsuit has just been filed, and the scope of what's being demanded is extraordinary. The organization is American Oversight, a nonpartisan government accountability group that uses Freedom of Information Act requests and federal lawsuits to force transparency from government agencies. You may remember them from the Matt Gaetz situation, American Oversight was one of the key organizations whose legal pressure contributed to the collapse of that nomination. Now they have Blanche in their crosshairs, and they've filed a lawsuit against the Department of Justice demanding all communications involving Todd Blanche related to a specific set of topics. Let's walk through exactly what they're demanding, because the specifics here are jaw-dropping. First demand: all communications, emails, text messages, signal chats, WhatsApp messages, any platform, any method, sent or received by Todd Blanche containing the words Epstein, Maxwell, transfer, Bureau of Prisons, limited immunity, Tallahassee, Florida. Why those words? Because there are serious, documented questions about whether Blanche was involved in decisions about Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator, including reports that he volunteered to interview Maxwell and discuss the possibility of a pardon, and about her transfer from one federal facility to another, specifically a reportedly more comfortable facility in Texas. Second demand: all text messages containing the term Epstein by itself with no other search filters. They want everything. Third demand: all email communications involving the terms special counsel, Mar-a-Lago, Jack Smith, Judge Cannon, Volume 2. And why does Judge Cannon appear in a lawsuit about Epstein? Because this isn't just about Epstein. This is about the full pattern of Blanche's conduct as acting Attorney General. One of the most documented and serious allegations against Blanche is that he, using the power of the Department of Justice, blocked the release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's Volume 2 report. The report about Trump's alleged obstruction and mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, the case over which Judge Aileen Cannon presided before she dismissed it. American Oversight is arguing that Blanche's prior role as Trump's personal criminal defense attorney and his subsequent actions once inside the Department of Justice make him fundamentally unfit to lead that department as an independent enforcer of the law. Now let's talk about what we actually know about the Blanche and Epstein connection, because this is where the story gets deeply serious. According to reporting from the New York Times, specifically from veteran journalists Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman, two of the most sourced reporters in Washington, Todd Blanche was involved in high-level internal discussions at the Trump administration about the handling of Epstein-related materials. Reporting places Blanche in conversations that took place in the Situation Room, the most secure meeting room in the White House, about these matters. Blanche has reportedly been given primary, day-to-day responsibility for the Epstein file handling within the Department of Justice. This means HE is the person in charge of what gets released, what stays redacted, what gets translated, and what gets buried. And that brings us to one of the most startling admissions in this entire saga. Blanche himself reportedly acknowledged at the end of January that the Department of Justice had never bothered to translate the foreign language documents in the Epstein files. Let that sink in. Jeffrey Epstein ran what prosecutors have described as a multi-decade international sex trafficking network with international victims, international co-conspirators, international financial flows. And the acting Attorney General, the man now overseeing all of this, admitted that his department simply never translated the foreign language documents. His stated reason? It wasn't practicable. Critics, legal experts, and survivors have called this explanation completely unacceptable. Because if you are genuinely trying to provide transparency about an international criminal network, translating the documents isn't optional. It's basic. One of the most explosive individual allegations against Blanche concerns Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator who is currently serving a 20-year federal prison sentence for sex trafficking. According to reports and legal filings, Blanche allegedly volunteered to personally interview Maxwell and to consider whether she should receive a pardon. Now understand what this means in context. Maxwell was convicted of helping Epstein traffic minors. She has information, potentially devastating information, about the identities of Epstein's clients, associates, and co-conspirators. Many of those names may still be unknown to the public. She has been a source of enormous speculation about who else could be implicated. The idea that the acting Attorney General of the United States, a man who served as Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer, personally involved himself in conversations about pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, raises questions that demand answers. Additionally, Maxwell was reportedly transferred from one federal facility to another, to a reportedly more comfortable institution in Texas. Critics and legal watchdogs are demanding to know what role, if any, Blanche played in that transfer decision. These are not fringe allegations. They are being raised by credentialed legal organizations, documented journalists, and Epstein survivors themselves in federal court filings and in public advocacy. The Judge Aileen Cannon dimension of this story is one that many people are not fully connecting, and it matters enormously. Judge Cannon is the Florida federal judge who was assigned to the classified documents case against Donald Trump. She made a series of rulings widely criticized by legal experts as favorable to the defense. And ultimately, she dismissed the entire case, a dismissal that legal scholars across the political spectrum questioned. Now remember, Blanche was Trump's defense lawyer in that very case. After the election, Cannon was reportedly the top candidate to become Attorney General. She's now widely discussed as a potential Supreme Court nominee. And according to the American Oversight lawsuit, there are potentially communications between or involving Blanche that reference Judge Cannon in the context of the classified documents case, the Jack Smith investigation, and related matters. The question that oversight organizations are pressing is this: was there any improper communication, coordination, or understanding between the Trump legal team, the Trump administration, and Judge Cannon regarding the handling of that case? The lawsuit is designed to surface whatever documentary evidence might exist. Todd Blanche's Senate confirmation hearing is scheduled for July 15th. And the convergence of legal actions, investigative reporting, and advocacy pressure building ahead of that date is extraordinary. Here is what critics, legal experts, and oversight organizations say senators must press Blanche on during that hearing. 1. His role in blocking or limiting the release of the Jack Smith Volume 2 report while serving as the Department of Justice official overseeing that matter, despite being Trump's former defense attorney on the very same case. 2. His involvement, if any, in decisions regarding Ghislaine Maxwell's prison transfer and any discussions about potential immunity or pardon considerations for Maxwell. 3. His failure to ensure the translation of foreign language documents in the Epstein files, and whether that failure was intentional, negligent, or directed from above. 4. His presence in Situation Room discussions about Epstein file handling and what decisions were made in those meetings. 5. His public statement that the Department of Justice does not need to be independent from the President, a statement that virtually every former Attorney General from both parties has described as disqualifying for the nation's top law enforcement officer. 6. His relationship to Judge Aileen Cannon and whether any communications occurred between his team and the judge or her chambers during the classified documents proceedings. 7. The multiple federal judges currently examining questions about prosecutorial conduct and misconduct in cases Blanche has been involved in, including courts in Florida, Virginia, and Illinois. It's easy for stories like this to feel like Washington political warfare. Democrats versus Republicans, confirmation politics as usual. But step back from the politics for a moment. Jeffrey Epstein's victims were real people. They were children, young girls, trafficked, abused, and exploited by a network that operated for decades. Many of them have fought for years, for decades, to see the full truth come out, to see all the names, all the documents, all the files. And right now, the person in charge of those files, the person who controls what gets released, what stays buried, what gets translated or doesn't, is a man whose independence from the very political figures potentially implicated in those files is, at minimum, deeply in question. Epstein survivors and their advocates have been clear and consistent. They want the full record. They want transparency. They want a Department of Justice leader who serves the American people, not the political interests of a single client. Whether you support or oppose this administration politically, those are demands that should resonate across every partisan line. Here's what we are watching and what you should be watching in the coming weeks. A federal court hearing before Judge Emmett Sullivan in Washington is examining a separate lawsuit seeking the complete unredacted Epstein files, including documents related to foreign nationals, alleged co-conspirators, and FBI interview notes. At the same time, American Oversight's new lawsuit demanding all Blanche communications related to Epstein, Maxwell, Judge Cannon, and Jack Smith is working its way through the federal court system. A judge will be assigned, deadlines will be set. Documents will either be produced or the fight to suppress them will become its own story. And federal judges in Florida, Virginia, and Illinois continue examining questions about prosecutorial conduct in cases connected to the Trump administration. Then comes July 15th. Todd Blanche sits before the Senate Judiciary Committee under oath, and senators, armed or not with the documents these lawsuits are seeking, will decide whether he is fit to lead the Department of Justice. The question at the center of all of this is actually very simple. Can a man who served as Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer independently and impartially lead the Department of Justice for all Americans? That question deserves a full, documented, transparent answer. And the lawsuits we covered today are the mechanism by which that answer may or may not be forced into the open before July 15th. If this video gave you clarity on a story the mainstream is underreporting, share it. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because this story is moving fast and we are going to cover every single development.
I would like to talk with you about the reflecting pool, as we discussed yesterday. At the moment, the Park Police are making arrests around the reflecting pool. The president has claimed that vandals, quoting him here, took some form of knife or blade and put a 250-foot-long gash into the beautiful facade of what took so much work, competence, and money to build and complete. He increased the estimate to 300 feet later, then to 350 feet, insisting that it was, quoting him again, cut and powerfully lifted off the surface, leaving very jagged, uneven edges. He was asked what proof there was of any of that, since it doesn't seem to be visible to any other person. And he said, well, you'll have to go see the Parks Department. They'll show it to you, or see the secretary, but I saw it. We have pictures. He also said, you'll see it in court. So you were a police commissioner in Texas, understand it? When people visiting the reflecting pool are being arrested, handcuffed, and dragged away by your police officers, you'd like to think that they have proper probable cause to arrest someone. I grew up in the Foreign Service, and there were plenty of countries in which arrests made to satisfy a political leader's narrative that had no basis in fact was something that they did. The American system of justice has not operated that way. What can you tell me here today about what damage was done to the reflecting pool, where this 350-foot gash came from, and why tourists are being arrested? What is the factual predicate for these arrests?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And indeed, I have spent, as a son of a police officer, as well as a police commissioner, I've spent virtually my entire life in and around the law enforcement industry, or business community, rather.
So you'd agree with me that arresting tourists to vindicate a political narrative, not because of any evidence of a crime, would be a wrong thing to do if that were what happened, correct?
Senator, the U.S. Park Police is one of the most extraordinary and historic police departments in the United States, founded in 1789. And in the year that I've had the opportunity and pleasure and privilege and honor to work with them, I have been amazingly impressed by their professionalism, their training, their discipline, their service, and their duty and service to this district and the people that live here.
Yeah, which is why these incidents seem so aggravating, and I'd like to ask you to respond to
And
that.
consequently, sir, I would say that, and I think that all people would agree, that ensuring that law and order is maintained for anyone to apply, and I'm not saying that you are, that the U.S. Park Police in any way use political motivation to carry out their duties, I think would be unjust, and in some ways an egregious accusation.
So what's the predicate then? Was there, in fact, a 350-foot gash done by a vandal to the reflecting pool?
The predicate, sir, is that I have no doubt that the police officers involved in the apprehensions of these individuals, of which I believe there were 5, were doing their duty, were enforcing the law appropriately. And I think that all of us should recognize and believe that vandalism of any kind is an affront to civilized society.
Yeah,
it hurts everyone.
But Mr. Linder, the question is, was there vandalism? did someone cut a 350-foot gash in the reflecting pool? And what vandalism did these individuals do? Is it really vandalism to pick a piece of floating peeled paint out of the reflection pool? People have run through the reflecting pool in the past. The president drove through the reflecting pool, apparently.
Sir, I stand by my statement that the U.S. Park Police operated and conducted their business of defending, protecting this city in an appropriate manner. There was no malfeasance, nor was there any political motivation to it. And furthermore, sir, as you know, this is an ongoing investigation, and consequently, I'm not in a position to share that information publicly. But once it is available publicly, I'm happy to meet with you. I met with you yesterday, sir. I'll meet with you anytime.
Was there or was there not a 350-foot gash in the reflecting pool?
Senator, I stand by
Is there
my
one now?
I stand by my statement, sir.
Your statement doesn't answer the question.
I stand by my statement, sir.
Okay, don't want to answer the question. I can see why you don't want to answer the question. You're in a terrible position because the president has made up a 350-foot gash. And unfortunately now police officers are being put in the position of having to make arrests that I suspect are going to fare very badly in court because there's nothing about touching the reflecting pool or picking up a piece of floating, peeling paint that amounts to vandalism as a matter of law. Thank you, Chairman. Thanks very much. Administrator Zeldin, on April 23rd, Daniel Coogan, for the EPA, filed a sworn